Welcome to the Parenting on the Spectrum show with board-certified behavior analyst and infant-toddler development specialist, Theresa Alexander Inman. Parenting on the Spectrum dives into real stories, challenges, and triumphs, offering invaluable insights and support for families on your unique journey. Let's get into the episode.
Welcome. I am so thrilled to have today again as my guest for the third time, Miss Sasha Gooray. She is the founder of Try Joyful Learning Center, which is a tutoring program for children. And Sasha will tell you a little bit more. And we're going to go into a different direction today. So I'm really excited to have Sasha share her journey. Thank you, Sasha, for being here again.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. So first of all, I want you to share, I know you've done this before, just share a little bit about Try Joyful, and then we'll talk about your journey to there.
Yeah, so Try Joyful Learning Center is a Christian online tutoring program, and our focus and goal is to ignite a love for learning in students. So we're not homework helpers, we're delving in to find the root cause of where the academic gap is, sealing it, and working and integrating academic life and social skills to propel each child into their divine purpose.
That is beautiful. And tell us then a little bit about your journey to find your purpose, because I think before we can help somebody find theirs, we have to know what ours is.
Yeah, so mine was definitely like snuck in through the back door. I didn't do anything through a traditional worldly sense. Like I didn't go to school for teaching. I didn't say, I desire to teach children when I grew up. My introduction into this really started with my daughter, who was diagnosed with autism. And once we entered the school system, she was caught in the gap. She just fell through the cracks. And I knew I had this desire to teach her the way God designed her to learn. So I pulled her out of school. I taught her. At that time, she was 2 years behind in reading, advanced in math, but not quite sure how to activate that. And now 5 years later, she's 2 years ahead of reading, a year ahead in math, and she is no longer on the spectrum. And so from there, as I was telling people, her testimony, our testimony, they were saying, what, we think this is a gift. This is a calling of yours, is to help children. And so as I started diving into it, I realized it came easy to me. And, the things that are easy to us, we think everyone does because it's easy, but we don't realize it is a special gift that God has given us to supply and help others.
And that's the thing though. Like you said, you stumbled on it and and you embrace that, right? That's the thing. Even though you had a bit of a rocky past, you still saw through all of your, all of the journey, all the struggles that you went through, and got out of yourself to first help your child and now other people, which is beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And I said that to say, so there, your journey was not exactly, up until your daughter, there were some things that you went through, some struggles that you had that I know a lot of parents can relate to. Would you mind sharing that with us? Because I think being transparent is really helpful because, like I said, people look at you and here's this stunningly beautiful, obviously intelligent woman. What possibly could she have gone through in her life?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to share. I'll preface this by saying that I really was hesitant to share my personal story and my past, because at first I didn't think it related to my calling to help children. And then I was like, it's so colorful that could sharing this even help families? Because I believe the lie, my life has to look airbrushed in order for people to say, she's a trustworthy voice. She's someone who we can to be with our children. And so, but that hasn't been my past. And one of the real passions I have with children is that from a young child, I had a lot of struggles. Throughout my whole, so starting at 10, I made my first suicide attempt. And so I was always I was battling with some extreme sadness. And obviously, And I mean, I wrote a will, I did the whole thing. And from that age 10 to probably in my early 30s, I struggled with suicidal ideation, whether getting to the brink of actually attempting it or at least staying with this like fog over my head. Like I just didn't desire to live. I had nothing to live for. I didn't know anything about purpose. I didn't know anything about calling. And at that time, I didn't know anything about the Lord, about that there was someone who really loved me and created me for a beautiful purpose that I'm fully equipped to do and can do and enjoy. And so that was a big part of it. And so when I was in my teenage years, my early teenage years, struggling with this desire to die, this extreme sadness, not quite fitting in and knowing my place, I really fell into the drug and alcohol scene. And I started doing hard drugs by the time I was 16. And that was a 10-year journey where I just started hanging out with unsavory people, doing unsavory things, and really leading a life to destruction with no desire to live. So I was still doing well in school because I was always just like academic. I enjoyed school. And so, but I would be going to school, like going to high school on drugs and leaving during the school day to do more drugs and coming back. And so because my grades weren't too horrible, like I slipped from an A B student to a BC student, but I was very quiet. I was very compliant. And so people, like you said, they would look at me and say, okay, she's okay. Like, yes, some things might be a little amiss, but, just teen angst, not realizing that there were some extreme internal challenges I was going through, some extreme demonic attacks I was going through. And so, I got by, and I got by through masking and pretending. And I got so good at it that when I entered rehab in my late 20s, at that point, it'd been years before I said anything truthful. I remember I was sitting with my counselor at the time, and I'd said, she was like, "What'd you have for lunch today?" And I just immediately, I was like, "I had a tuna sandwich." And I was like, I dislike tuna sandwiches. Like I didn't have a tuna sandwich. I had something totally different. But I just admitted to her, I was like, you know what? I just lied. And I was like, I have no clue why I lied about my sandwich. And what I didn't know, that was the beginning of like, that was a breakthrough moment for me, beginning of this journey of masking, because I'd been doing it since I was a small child. And I was part of a family that masked for their own, challenges that they were struggling with. And so I come from this environment that pretending, and, I grew up in the 90s. So putting on our Laura Ashley dresses and, ironing the lace on the prairie dress and looking really put together. I was so good at it. But on the inside, I was completely empty. And so, that was in my early 20s that I had that breakthrough of like, I'm lying. Why? And I don't desire. And it's still like, this journey towards joy is still a journey. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's an abundance for me. And one of the reasons I didn't desire to share yet is that I'm not completely there. No, I'm not sitting at bed at night anymore thinking of killing myself, and life would be better if I was dead and the world would be better. However, this pocket of joy that the Lord has for us that we can live in, I'm still walking in that. And so it was so interesting to me that God gave me this business, and he had spoke to my heart, and he said, you're going to ignite a love for learning in children. He gave me the scripture that this business stands on, which is Psalm 16:11, which says, in the presence of the Lord is fullness of joy, in the right hand is his treasure forevermore. And also Ephesians 4:23, which says that we take off our old self and we put on our new self. So all of this is so prophetic, because God was using me to help children to really break through for myself too. And so I'm journeying along with the children imperfectly, But there's a phrase that I use often that I tell the children. I'm like, we're walking in victory together towards victory. Like those promises are already mine. If God said, this is your business, you ignite a love for learning in children, that means I have love in me. That means I have joy in me. I'm just walking in victory towards victory.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So beautiful. And it's, the fact that you went through that and now you're walking with the children, you're more able to understand them. You're more able to relate to them, the things that they might be going through, the sadnesses and, all the struggles, because they don't come to you because they're flourishing in school. They come to you because they're having struggles. Just as you had struggles, they might have been a little different. However, struggle. And if we can, come together to work through that, there's nothing more powerful.
Right. Definitely.
Now, did you ever find the source of your sadness? Did you ever look back and think what could have been?
Yeah, I think there are various things. I had a couple traumatic experiences when I was very, very young. As a child, and then through there, we in Ephesians it says we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, and so whenever we have a purpose in our life, and especially if we don't know it, the enemy of our souls, he knows it, and so he will take these events that happen, and because they're hidden in darkness, because of abuse that happened when I was younger, was something that was hidden. He was like, okay, now I'm going to isolate you, magnify this, and then just like pour out a huge demonic attack on you to make you think you're not worthy, to make you desire to die. And so there's a lot that's added to it. So that's why, I know you and I were speaking briefly before the episode started of like putting things into the light, the power of just saying, you know what? Like, I'm not even going to pretend anymore. Like, I'm not going to wait till everything is okay. Let me just expose it into the light and allow the healing to come. The thing I'll say about that is I think of, like I told you, I did a lot of like drugs and alcohol. So there were times that I had friends that we would have to like help throw up, because we couldn't just leave them in a certain state. Mm-hmm. And so if you're that sick and you can die because you can choke on your own vomit, if you put your finger, like if you throw up, it's going to be so messy. It's going to smell. It's going to be disgusting. You'll fall in it, get in your hair. However, it comes out. And now we get to clean it up. Versus if we just left it inside, like you can die from asphyxiation.
Absolutely. Yes. And it makes me think of the song, the more broken we are, the more light gets through. That line in the song, I don't remember the whole song, but that line has always stuck with me and I don't think it's that we are broken as people, because I believe God made us perfect. It's just that we go through, like, being vulnerable, I think that's what I see with this, right? The more broken, the more vulnerable we are, the more we share, because we are sharing here now. And there are people who are going through this. There are people who have gone through this. And seeing you today, okay, here you are. You continued. You didn't give up. You endured. You persevered. They can too. And it tells children that they also can.
Right.
Share that light that was put in them. So, yeah. And it's funny when you talked about lying. I actually, in my younger years, because nothing I said was believed, because, I've been through some trauma as well. And I'd say things and, my parents would be like, no, you're lying. And I was like, but it was really the truth. So then I started lying because it was just easier to lie because I wasn't believed when I told the truth anyway. And it just became a thing. And like you, sometimes I'd say things and I thought, girl, you didn't even have to lie about that. Like there was nothing in that to lie about, right? Much like your tuna fish sandwich. There was nothing in that. Like, what would it do to you to just tell the truth? And it was a journey though, because when it just becomes such a habit that you think, you have to think about it consciously to say, okay, you know what? It's safe for me to tell the truth. And I think that's what it is. Safety. right? You found safety in not telling the truth, right? Just like I did. Because it meant if I didn't tell the truth, I wasn't going to get beaten. Things weren't going to happen. So I lived a lie.
Yeah. And for me, it was like extreme insecurity. If anyone knows the real me, and they're not going to like me. So let me be a pretend me. And if you don't like the pretend me, at least it's not the real me. So then I can be okay. It's all fear. It's all self-protection, and it's all, leads to destruction.
Yes. Yeah. And, I didn't think of it as self-protection because, again, too, in my teens, I told people I didn't even have low self-esteem. I had none, whatsoever. And thankfully, I have some really close friends, one in particular, Bev, who just helped me through everything. Because every time I said something that was self-deprecating, she was like, but T, look at you've done. And I was like, it's not about what I do. It's just, but I didn't feel it, even though I think I accomplished things to make it look better and maybe help myself feel better, but it didn't work. I had to read more, I had to do more, I had to be more, just try. I just had this era of, always striving, which, really wasn't what, like the Bible says, we rest. We're not here to strive and toil day and night. And I didn't know how to, because if I stopped, I think I'd have to think about myself and get to know myself. And I didn't like her.
Right. Yeah, I'm really facing it. I think you mentioned that something really powerful too is that, your parents told you that you lied, and that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when we speak these, what we don't realize are word curses over ourselves or our children, they become that very thing. So even if you start saying stuff so one of the things like my parents would do is I liked walking on like cracks and different things. And it was also like, be careful, you're not going to fall. You're not going to fall. And there was this fear of falling that entered in. That seems nothing wrong, right? Just saying, be careful. However, just a change of words of like, wow, you're doing such a great job walking on the cracks. Like, continue keeping that up. You then make the child recognize, hey, what I'm doing is something that does require a bit of skill and attention, and it helps them keep the attention. But since they didn't fall, then just encourage them to be curious and courageous in that type of way. Or if it's your family's thing to not step on, the cracks or different things, just, ask them to come off. But there was many things that were spoken over me as a child, and I spoke over myself, and then I became. And so a big part of my tutoring is, what have we been speaking or hearing about ourselves? And that's part of the cracks we're sealing, is breaking that lie. Like when I tutor, we're not allowed to say, I don't know, because in the word, it says we have perfect understanding in all things. And so once we say, I don't know, we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You've cut yourself off from knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have them say instead? So for the parent who's like, what do I say?
Yeah. So, what, this is me walking victory to victory with them, because I find myself still saying, I don't know. And I'm like, I teach not to do this. So for, in each situation is different. With tutoring, we say, I got this, give me a moment to get, to recall the answer, or I need help.
Awesome.
And so, those are just two great ways to be like, it's a spiritual thing. Be open to getting the answer, whether it's by sitting and getting it on your own or seeking help, versus saying, I don't know, which shuts the door.
It does. It does. And I find a lot of children have difficulty asking for help. So making it okay to ask for help. Because I know for me, I didn't ask for help because I was always told how smart I was. And smart people don't ask for help. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't make you any smarter. So I tell parents a lot of times, stop telling your children they're smart, because studies have shown it does not make them smart. It actually prevents them from absorbing more information, from learning more, from experiencing more, because as a smart person, you're supposed to already know. So, yeah, so I found I was really afraid. Like, I would not raise my hand because smart people should know. And so instead, I tell them, tell your child like what they did. So instead of, oh, you're smart. Oh my goodness, you read that whole sentence all by yourself. Or you're a mathematician, you're a reader, you're a problem solver, those type of terms instead of smart, which doesn't say anything, right? It doesn't describe anything when you say smart. It's just a generic blanket, paint that you're throwing over something.
Yeah, and I think it's redefining these things too. Like smart doesn't mean doing everything on your own. Like there's this whole idea like the smartest people do everything on their own. And I got into this with building this business like, oh, I've got to be the admin, I've got to be the accountant, I've got to be the media person. And if I do, then I get to tell everyone, look what I built. And there's such pride in that. But being intelligent and being successful means that you know your strengths and you know others and you lean on them and you get help. I work with a lot of young children who have very strong leadership skills, and I know that they're called to be a leader, an entrepreneur. But what I teach them is like to first be a leader, you have to first be a follower. And so, it's an upside down kingdom, those who the first is last and the last is first. And so it's really redefining what do these words like really mean, but also, like you said, seeing the root of some words, like, I don't know, and saying, okay, well, we're now speaking against what we believe by saying these words that are common in our modern language that aren't serving us.
Exactly. And I just want to expound a little bit on when you said, being a follower, because a lot of people, parents like, I don't want my child to be a follower. However, you've got to be coachable, right? The best athletes are coached. They have coaches, the best people, the people, when I say best people, I don't mean, anybody's better than the other, but the people doing the things, everybody has a coach. The CEOs have a coach. People have coaches. So, and mentors. So it's really important that we're open to that and having children know that it's okay not, to that, you've never arrived, right? Like you were saying earlier, we haven't arrived. So there's, it's always nice to have somebody that we can go to help us go to that next step. Because I see a lot of young children these days who, well, I'm good at this, so I don't have to go to practice. I'm good at this, so I don't have to. It's because you're good at it. It's your gift that you go to it so you can hone your skills because, you haven't arrived. You don't have all the elements. Everything's not put in place yet. I read of a coach. I'm reading a book called Discipline is something. I can't remember the name of it. Discipline is Destiny. And, he talks about a coach who, when the, of a college football team, and the first thing he teaches them is to tie their shoelaces. It's like, how fundamental is that? However, if your shoelaces aren't tied correctly, they're going to, open up on the field and that could cause some problems. So teaching those fundamental skills and, having a coach to help you through those things is vital.
Yeah, that's great because, when we say a follower, we're talking about submitting and honoring to those who God has placed above us. So I'm not talking about following your friend, but like follow your parents, follow your tutor and listen to them. I'm part of a faith school, and the apostle I sit under was teaching last night, and he said, a pilot needs to follow the air traffic controller. Because if the air traffic controller says, listen, I need you to turn left, and the pilot's like, no, I'm a leader, I'm not a follower, well, that's the end of that story.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to submit and honor those who are put above us so that we're doing things in a way that is beneficial to us and others.
Absolutely. And, you just saying that brought to mind a story I heard of a pilot who was very anxious to take off. And the air traffic controller said, don't take off. There are people ahead of you. And he took off and there was a plane right over him and both, everybody perished because he did not listen to the air traffic controller. And that is so tragic. I mean, I don't know. So we just have to be mindful of what we're listening to, who we're listening to, and understanding that there are people who, like you said, God has put into our lives to guide us through.
Yes, definitely.
Well, anything you'd like to leave this moment with, Miss Sasha?
Yeah, so just speaking directly to parents and just looking at, being transparent with our stories. You've asked me like the root, what started things. And so like for me, mine was abuse, mine was sexual abuse. I know someone who's very close to us who really struggled in school. And his story was that his mom was a prostitute and they lived in a hotel while he was going to school, and nobody at the school knew what was going on. But I also know someone who struggled in the same ways as the two of us, with different stories in our background. Like I grew up in a wonderful middle class home, great school. I know someone who was in a great school and their parents loved them, and they were just sad. They felt so inadequate because their parents were very successful, their siblings were very successful, and they didn't know their purpose. And so we have these three different stories. And sometimes it's easy to say, you know what, my story doesn't matter because it's not as bad as theirs. Like, look at this man who's, this young boy living with his mom in a hotel in this horrific situation. Like, look, there's sexual abuse here. I didn't have that. But pain is pain is pain. And is anything that's in darkness, the enemy is going to use so that he can pull us all out of our destiny. And so, God has created each child. Like every child is created for a purpose, and he's very intentional, and he chose the specific parents for them, which means that if you have a child, there's nobody on earth who's a better parent for them than you, regardless of how broken your past may be or your present may be. So it's just exposing and being honest, like, you know what, I've struggled with this. I'm struggling with this. But know that you yourself are walking in victory towards victory, because God is not going to give you a gift that he doesn't truly believe and know you're fully equipped to raising up to become the person they're designed to be. I think, I've worked with all sorts of children, and in my walk, I've seen all sorts of things. And I know all of us parents desire our children to go further and faster than us. And regardless of what mistakes we may have made as a parent or even in years before, that is always still possible.
Absolutely. And I don't think I could have said it any better. So we will close here. I thank you so much, Sasha, for coming back and just encouraging us, to move forward to our purpose. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And to our audience, thank you so much for watching. We will see you again next week, same time, with more inspiration and awesome tips to help you on your parenting